Hey guys, hope you are well and that you are ready for some serious Illustrator action. This week we will learn how to add text around circles in a professional way, how to create a concentric pattern with the transform effect, and how to add the radial gradient opacity mask to our composition. Sounds complicated, I know, but don't worry, I will explain everything step by step. And since you asked, you can get the t-shirt I'm wearing from the merchandise section under the description below. Alright guys, let's do this. I have already all the elements on the top and I'm going to build everything around this little light bulb here in the middle. So I prepared the font and the text. This font, by the way, is called Heavytess and I included the link in the description below if you want to download it. It's a free font. I love it. It's a really cool typeface to work with. So first of all, I am going to turn on my guide so I know where the center point is. And then I'm going to use the circle or ellipse tool, go to the center where the guides intersect each other, and then holding down the Alt key or Option key, I can start drawing my circle. And while I'm doing this, I'm also going to hold down the Shift key to make sure it's going to stay a perfect circle. So this circle is going to be the outline on which I'm going to place the text. I will probably put it somewhere around here. We can always change the size later, but I think that's a good size. And then I am going to copy the text. So I just highlight it, Command C or Control C, and then using the type tool, go close to the edge of the shape and holding down the Alt key or Option key, notice how the cursor is changing to this shape or this type of icon. And if I click here, it's going to already turn the circle into type on a path object. Now, if I use Command or Control V to paste the text in, as you can see, it's already there. Now, at this point, it's important to switch to the direct selection tool, which is A on the keyboard. Once you have that selected, you can drag the end point all the way here on the right side to 3 o'clock and then drag the starting point all the way to here 9 o'clock. And then you can see starting point is here and the end point there. Now, if I want to make sure that the text sits exactly in the middle, I have to set the text to align center. Once I choose that, you can see it's perfect. Now that we have this, I'm going to duplicate it by using Command C or Control C and then Command F or Control F to paste it on top of this. It's the paste in front feature, which you can find in the edit menu as well. I'm going to hide the original version, and this new version I'm going to replace with the other text. So I'm again just copying and pasting that text in, and once again set align to center. Now comes again the direct selection tool, so the white arrow tool, and at this point we don't even need the guides anymore. If I want to see these circles better, I'm just going to put them on another layer where the highlight color is red, so you can see it also better, both the start, end point and the center point. This center line is what I'm going to grab with the direct selection tool and drag it inside the shape. See, what happens there is that the text now is inside. The reason I'm doing this is because if I keep the text outside, obviously it's not going to work well because it's going to put the text upside down. So if I drag it inside, that's going to work much better. But what we have to fix is the same as before. We have to drag the start point, so that little line here, and the end point a little bit further out. Now the end point sometimes is a little bit tricky to find, but I managed to find it here. So again, to the right and this one to the left. What we need to do also is to select all the text. So double click on the text and then press Command A or Control A, is to be able to move this outside the circle. Because what happened by moving it inside the circle is that it's now not aligned with the other text. So you can see while the Let Your Ideas text sits on the circle, so it uses it as a baseline, this other text here is sitting inside the circle. And it could be an artistic decision that you wanted to do it like this, but what I would like to do is to select this text here and then move it out so it's aligned to the text on the top. So what I'm going to do is a useful shortcut. It's called baseline shift, which is Alt or Option Shift key and then down arrow to push it outwards. Up arrow would be to push it in towards the center of the shape. And you can see how I managed to align the circle to the top of the characters, or the cap height of the characters. And then now what I need to do is, because I moved it out, I also need to reduce the tracking. Now this is something you can do from the character menu up here, and you can find the tracking here, and we can set it to probably something like -100, but even that is a little bit too much. If you want, you can also use Option left and right arrows or Alt left and right arrows to quickly set the tracking. And the same shortcut can also be used for kerning, which is what we call when you refine individual spacing between characters. So here, for example, the TH is a little bit too close, but the E can come a little bit closer. And then especially between the W and A, we can just go a little bit further. I mean, just keep them closer to each other. That's again, Alt or Option left arrow in this case. And then I think the G and H can go a bit closer as well. I and G and the L and I can be separated a bit. And this was mainly important at the bottom to be fixed, but we can also check the top text here. And I can see E and A can be separated a bit. D and E can be closer slightly. And then U, R, O, U, this one, Y and O can be closer as well. These can be moved apart slightly. So already looking much better. So a bit of kerning is very useful, especially when you start putting text on a path, or whenever you work with headlines or titles, always pay attention to this. And now that we have the text in place, we can get rid of these original ones here on the top. And let me show you one thing before we go any further. And that is a tool that I love, and sometimes I would use even on circular text. It's called Touch Type tool. You can get to it by pressing Shift T or right click on the type tool and select it from the toolbar. Now, what this tool can do is to individually move or shift and rotate, even scale characters around without losing the editability of the text. So for example, if I wanted to move the U a little bit down, I can do that. If I wanted the R to be rotated slightly, make the text a little bit more playful, I can do just that. I can also make the text or individual characters smaller or bigger. Maybe have the Y slightly bigger. And you can see already how it's starting to look a bit more interesting. And I could spend a whole day doing this, but let's move on. And I'm not going to repeat the same thing on the text on the bottom because it's very simple and easy to work with. But most importantly, the text is still editable and it's still on the path that we created for it. So the next step is going to be to start adding all of these elements here, maybe starting with this little star here on the right. I'm just going to place it somewhere aligned to the center. Just going to bring back my guides as well so I can see where it needs to go. Maybe make it slightly bigger, and then I'm going to put it on the right side as well and just rotate it around slightly so it looks more like a slightly different angle. All right. That's starting to look good, and on its own already it could work as a design like a badge. But let's take this to the next level. And by the way, the file I started with is something that we are sharing with our members. If you want to get access to it and additional exclusive content that we do for members only, you can find the link in the description below and you can check out which tier you prefer to join. But let's not stop here. I'm going to show you a really cool way of using the transform effect to create a radial pattern. So I would like to use these elements here on the top left and make it look like they are just spreading or scattering out from the center. So really representing ideas floating around and just spreading out from the center where the little light bulb is. So to be able to do this, first of all, what I'm going to do is to turn back my guides and draw a rectangle. This is going to be the area in which I would like to draw my elements. Now this rectangle I'm going to set to be transparent, so I remove the fill and stroke colors. By the way, you can do that by pressing the question mark on the keyboard or the / key, and whatever color is currently highlighted, whether it's the fill or the stroke, that keyboard shortcut is going to remove it, so set it to none. Now this is a completely empty shape and I can see it's centered in the middle of the composition, which is perfect. But if I want, I can also move this around and make sure it's aligned to the center, to the guide. Now that it's there, I'm going to copy, paste this, and then use another shortcut, Command or Control 5, to turn it into a guide. So this is something you can find in the View menu, and under Guides, there's Make Guides. That's the one I used. So now that it's turned into a guide, I can just put it onto my guides layer. And you can see if I turn that off, I still have the other rectangle, which I'm going to use together with a line. Now I'm going to draw that line, and I actually need my guides for this as well, because this should start from the center point, like the original circle that we started with. And I'm going to start drawing this and hold down the Shift key to make sure it's completely vertical. Now it doesn't need to go really high up. I'm just going to draw it somewhere up to there. I'm going to turn off my guides and I will select this and the other shape. Now both of these are invisible or transparent because there's no fill or stroke assigned to them. Let's just place something like this camera somewhere here in the middle. All right, let's just select these shapes again. I need my invisible line as well. There you go. And now that all three of them are selected, I can use the Control G or Command G shortcut to turn them into a group. So this group is the one that we will be using for the transform effect. So now that the group is ready, we can go to the Effect menu, and from Distort and Transform, I will use the Transform effect. And it opens up this lovely but slightly complicated dialog box. Well, first of all, what you need to do is turn on preview so you can see the changes you are doing. And I'm going to set the copies to 5 just so we can see what happens. When I start dragging the angle to the left, you can already see what is happening here. So why is it rotating around itself and not around the shape? Because the reference point currently is set to the center point. Once I change that to the bottom, it's already fixing itself because now the whole selection, this whole group is used as the reference point, and the bottom point of it is in the center of the original circle. So that's why we needed that empty line. That's the one that's anchoring it to the center. And you will see why I needed the other empty rectangle as well. So now all we need to decide is how many copies we want. Well, I think I'm going to use 45 degrees, and for that I can use 7 copies. And this is also, by the way, a shortcut I use very often. Whenever a dialog box is selected, you can use up and down arrows to quickly increase or decrease a value. And you can see how quickly I can see how many I need. Now 45 degrees is exactly 360 divided by 8. And the reason why we need 7 copies, because 1 is the original one plus 7. So that's how you get 8 times 45 equals 360. And the reason I mentioned that is because if you want to use a different angle, so let's just say 60 degrees, again, you just need to do a quick math. So 6 times 60 is 360. So how many copies do we need? Well, 5. So if I have 4, that's not enough because we have 1 here on the top and 4 copies. We just have to increase it up to 5. If I, for example, want to have 9 copies, I know that the angle should be 36. And just to show you, if I reduce it by 1, that's exactly 10 instances. So the original and 9 copies. So again, this is 36 degrees times 10, which is 360, the full circle. But let's just go back to the original idea of using 45 degrees with 7 copies. And that's all we need here. So I can click OK, and our transform effect is ready. Now comes the interesting part. I'm going to select all these elements here, cut them out, Command or Control X, then select the group and double click on it. This is called isolation. When you double click on a group, you start working inside it. And you can see the little breadcrumbs on the top as well. So we can see we are working inside the group. And if we rename this group and call it, let's say just pattern, then we will be able to tell that we are within the pattern. It's always good to name your groups anyway. So it just helps you even when you are in isolation mode. Now I'm going to use Control or Command F to paste all the elements in. But what happened is that because these elements are outside of our safety rectangle, the whole composition is getting messed up. But look at this. Once I move them inside that rectangle, actually things are going to work fine. Let me just turn back my guides. If I double click outside and turn back the guides, we will be able to keep track where that rectangle is. So now if I double click again and start moving these shapes around, you see that as long as I stay within that safety rectangle, the camera is not going to move around. But as soon as I move outside of it, the whole composition starts to blow up and completely get messed up here at the bottom. So that's why it's very important to create a rectangle like that, because as long as you stay working within the rectangle, you are free to place these elements wherever you want. And obviously the transform effect is going to copy them, in this case 7 times, rotated around the center point of the design. But of course, I want to scatter these shapes around more. So I'm going to just zoom a little bit closer and let's just have some fun moving these shapes around. And I will probably speed this up because it's not that interesting. I'm just scaling and moving shapes around. Okay, so something like that I'm quite happy with. By the way, let me know if you are interested to see how to do these little icons that I created. So the camera, the brush tool, the pen tool, I can show it in another tutorial. Just let me know in the comments if you're interested, and also maybe tell me what type of objects would you like to see created as icons. And last but not least, I would like to teach you how to use a gradient opacity mask. So this whole shape that we have here is generated by that group, the single group that we have here on the top. And by the way, because the transform effect is a live effect, we can always just select the group and turn it off from the appearance panel. If I turn it off, we can see it as the only element or the only part of that whole pattern that is generated, and all the rest is something I can't even select at this point because it's all part of the effect. But if you want to make more variety on the shapes around it, you could go to the object menu and choose expand appearance, which is going to get rid of the effect, but it will turn all of those elements into editable objects. So let me just show you how it works. If I click on expand appearance, now all of these elements are selectable. So I can double click and you can see each one are still in groups, but I would be able to double click again, go inside and start moving things around. So that just helps to create a bit more variety if you want to. But I don't need that at this point, so I'm just going to undo and go back to the original transform effect setup. Because what I'm going to do here is to go to the transparency panel and choose make mask. So while I'm on the group, I click on make mask, and by default it starts with a black mask. Now, that's actually not bad, but I just wanted to show you that if you have the clip option turned off, then it's an empty mask, something that completely shows everything. So when this icon here is in white, that means everything is visible. When it's black, everything is hidden. So this mask, by the way, is applied on the selected group, not everything else in the design, just the selected group. Now, This is important as well. To be able to start adding designs into the mask, or to actually define what the mask is going to do, you have to click on the icon again. So this is how you work with the objects, and this is how you work with the mask. And the way you can tell that you're working within the mask is by looking at your tab. It should say Opacity Mask up here, but also the Layers panel will say Opacity Mask. It's almost like a separate realm. You're working either in the object dimension or in the mask dimension. So we are in the mask realm, and what I'm going to do now is to draw a circle. So I'm going to use the ellipse tool, and we actually need to show our mask. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, actually turn the guides back on because we will need them. Then go back to the mask section, and then I'm going to use the ellipse tool and Alt click and drag from the center point out, something that completely covers the whole area. And then now I'm going to switch to the gradient panel. Radial gradient is what I want. And you can see I have white on the left and black on the right. And that's actually all we needed, because that is the opacity mask that's going to keep the center part visible. And as we get closer to the edges, the gradient turns black, which means it starts to hide those elements. So it creates this nice fading effect. So from the center outwards, like a radial fade in a way, you can think about it like that. So you can see my transparency is showing that exactly. And by the way, if I want, I can go back to the gradient and even adjust the fade itself. So I can get the little star to the right, which is going to show more of the objects, or drag it further to the left, and then it will show less. Also, you can press G on the keyboard and then use the gradient annotator, which is even easier because you can do it directly on the design. So this is quite cool. You can even drag the endpoint out further or further in. So if I drag that point in, you can see we can hide even more from it if we wanted to. But I'm just going to keep it somewhere like this. So it's almost like a backdrop. I don't want the pattern to be too overpowering because the most important design element is actually in the center. So I'm going to just leave it at that. And don't forget to go back to the transparency panel, come back to the normal real world and leave the mask realm behind. Now we can turn off the guides, click away, and maybe as a final effect that can tie everything together, we can add another circle with another gradient on it, which I actually already prepared, but it's the same exact thing what we've done in the opacity mask. In this case, it's outside, so it's not in a mask, it's just simply sitting here at the bottom of the composition, and I can show you that's the gradient I used. So it's two colors, there's a fade between the two as well, and I have this set to hard light blend mode. This is how it would look like in normal mode, but I think hard light, maybe overlay, that's a little bit too dark. I think hard light is probably the best combination with the background color and the whole composition in general. So the cool thing about opacity masks is that they are completely editable, so they are non-destructive. So we can just select the group, and within the transparency panel, if we want to see without the mask, we just shift click on the mask, which reveals how it was before. And then we can see it after by just simply undo and redo. Let me know in the comment section which one do you prefer. Do you prefer it with the opacity mask or without? They both look quite nice, but I think with the mask, it's just a little bit more subtle and easier to read. But I would love to know what you think, so just use the comments. Also, don't forget, if you fancy going through the whole workflow and you would like to practice everything you've learned today, then you can get this file by becoming a member today. Let us know in the comment section what would you like us to cover next time on this series. Click on the link in the description or the join button to become a member if you want to work on future projects with us and see the whole design or illustration process live. Thanks a lot for watching. Like and share this video if you enjoyed it. Have fun learning, guys, and I will see you in the next one.